Hey, welcome back. We're in the kitchen today. It's a little cold outside. We got a little bit of snow flurries going on. Kind of our full springtime again. If you had them tomatoes planted, guess what? You planted too early. And we warned you. But today, since it's a little cooler, we're going to get back in the kitchen and show you a recipe here in the kitchen. We're going to make homemade sauerkraut. And if you've never had homemade sauerkraut before, it is phenomenal. And if you're not a big sauerkraut fan, try the homemade stuff and it might change your mind. I love it with like smoked sausage. We'll cook it in a skillet and throw some sauerkraut in there with it and warm the sauerkraut up with the sausage. And man, that's a mighty fine dinner right there. And throw in a little bit of leftover chopped up bacon. You can't beat that meal right there. Also, the store-bought sauerkraut, because it's been canned and made shelf stable, they do that with heat, and it kills all of the beneficial bacteria like you have in homemade sauerkraut. Homemade sauerkraut is really good. It's got really good bacteria in it that's good for your gut, and you just don't get that with canned stuff. And again, it tastes a lot better than the store-bought stuff. Big shout out to my cousin Don and his wife Annette. Apparently we are their evening entertainment every night. They always look for our new videos. Haven't seen my cousin in a while. Hello to you. We'll get down your way. We'll see you one of these days. So also shout out to my wife Kelly. Got me a new hat. She got tired of seeing my dirty one in the videos, but you might see that in the outside videos coming up because I don't want to get my new one dirty. And a big thank you to Mom. Sent me those canning lids that she was able to get in her area that we couldn't get in ours. So that was a big plus. So let's get to it. I know you don't like sitting around. Let's get to the point. We're going to make the sauerkraut. And there's only two ingredients, cabbage and salt. It does not get any easier than that, folks. So we got this head of cabbage. Kind of a medium head of cabbage, and we have our salt. I also picked up this fermentation kit here a while back, and it's good for not just sauerkraut. You can do pickles, you can do all kinds of stuff in it. Made by Mason Tops. Got it on Amazon, of course. But it's a pretty cool kit. It comes with your masher thing that you need for the sauerkraut to get things worked up, get those juices flowing in the cabbage. It comes with these little burpee top lids. It's got a little thing that opens up and lets pressure out, but it doesn't let weird bacteria into the jar. And it also comes with these glass pucks made for a wide mouth jar, which keeps your ingredients down below the level of the liquid. So super cool. But we're going to quarter this cabbage. Save your outside leaf, and we'll show you what to do with that a little bit later. But we're going to quarter that. We're going to cut the core off of it, and then we're going to slice it against the grain as thin as we can get. And we'll be back when we've got that done. You can see we got a pretty fine slice on that cabbage. There's those cores we cut out after we quartered it. And I just put it in a big bowl so it's easier to handle. Non-reactive bowl. And then for the good rule of thumb is for every head of cabbage you're going to use a tablespoon of salt. And I'm thinking you can use just about any kind of salt. However, I would not use iodized salt, but we use kosher salt for everything. So I'm going to get this salted, and then we're going to get our little masher here, and we're going to start working that cabbage down to get those juices to flow out of it, and that's what we're looking for. So I'll add the salt and I'll get to mashing this thing, and then after we are satisfied with what it looks like, and I'll show you beforehand, we're going to get some quart jars out and stuff it into the jars. We'll be back. Now if you don't want to slice it with a knife, there's other options. You could, if you had a big mandolin, you could use that, slice it with that. The old school folks used to use a giant wooden box looking thing that fit a whole head of cabbage in it, and it slid on this this wooden tray that had a blade on it, and they'd shred that whole head at a time, but they were doing a lot more bulk than we do it. And you don't have to do just cabbage. You can do other vegetables. You can put kohlrabi or any kind of hearty vegetable that can shred up. You don't want to use real leafy stuff like lettuce. You could probably use chard or something like that, or kale you could probably put in there, would probably work. But you could put purple cabbage in it just fine. It's just a different color, that's all it is. You can use different spices, caraway seed, fennel seed, celery seed, you know, spice it up a little bit if you'd like. Change the profile as much as you like, make it your own as usual. Alright, we've been mashing this up. One thing I did find in that bowl, the cabbage wants to move around on you because of the round bottom. So I got my big stainless steel pot out and it works much better. So we're going to keep mashing this down, add a little bit at a time. I had my heaping tablespoon of salt. Remember, kosher salt's a little bit bigger grain, so you need to heap up all your measurements on those. So I've been adding a little bit of my tablespoon each time I throw some cabbage in. And we're going to keep mashing. I have also found with the masher, you can, instead of coming straight down on it, which just kind of packs it in the bottom of the pan, I turn it just at a slight angle, and it does a lot better job busting that cabbage up. You can see we're quite a bit down in there already. You can see the cabbage is getting really moist, and I just kick this stuff around a little bit and then stomp it again. This is actually made to go in the jar. This wide end's for a wide mouth jar, narrow end for a narrow mouth. You can stomp this stuff right down into the jar. So we've got this mashed up pretty good. You can see when it's getting close, it starts looking like onions when you're cooking them in a skillet. They start to get a little bit translucent, and that's what you're looking for. Now we're going to let this sit and macerate for a while and pull out some more of those juices, and that's macerate with an S. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes or so. Now you're probably wondering, you don't have to use all this fancy stuff, this fermentation kit that I ordered. None of that. People back in the day didn't have this stuff, and you can still do it. Put it in a mason jar just like we're going to do with this, and pack it all down in there. You can use a regular lid, but before you put the lid on, get like a little sandwich bag full of water and put on top, and use that cabbage leaf like we're going to show you here in a little bit how to use it. And that'll hold the liquid down in the jar and it won't dilute your brine. And then when you put your lid on, screw your band down to where it touches and then back it off about a quarter to half a turn. And then that way, when that jar needs to burp as it ferments, it'll allow it to do that. And you don't even have to use a mason jar. You could use a bowl or something like that. If you use a bowl, get like a gallon-sized Ziploc bag and put water in it. Put that on top with that whole cabbage leaf to hold the little particles down. And weight it down with that, and then put some like cling wrap over the whole thing. And before you put the cling wrap on, put like a little pinhole in it, so it'll stay sealed around the outside, but when the gases need to burp off, it'll just blow out that little pinhole. But there's lots of ways to do this. There's also big crock jars you can do this in. I had one that was fairly good size, and the lid actually fit down in a groove that you would put water in, and the water would keep the crazy bacteria that you don't want in it out, but it would let the gases bubble out. But if you're going to do fresh sauerkraut, you don't want to make a huge batch like that because you want to be able to consume it before it goes bad. So I got rid of that big jar. All right, we'll be back in a bit. All right, we're back. You can see when you push on it, the liquid comes to the surface. That's kind of what you're looking at. So we're going to pack it in this jar right here. We'll smash it down in there good, and we'll get her sealed off. So we got that packed into the jar, and as you can see, when there's just the slightest amount of pressure, that liquid comes to the top. And we left a little air space in here so that puck would fit in the top. We put the rest in another jar, and I'll show you how to do that without the puck. We'll use a Ziploc bag like I told you before. But we're going to use those cabbage leaves right now. I'll show you what those are for. So we cut that cabbage leaf so it would fit in the top of the jar. And what that does is it keeps the smaller particles submerged underneath the brine and not coming up around the sides. And then this little glass puck goes in the middle, and you see the liquid is above the level of the cabbage in the jar. And then you put one of these little burp caps on the top in the place of a regular lid. And then you put a ring on the top, just like that. And then it can burp when it needs to. And I'll fix this jar up, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. So with this one, I just put a sandwich-sized Ziploc bag in the top, and then I filled it about 3/4 full of water and zipped the top of it. And you can see that keeps the cabbage underneath the level of the brine. I'll just throw this one in the fridge, but that one there can go in the root cellar. It's going to take a couple weeks to ferment, and then you will have sauerkraut. We're going to put a little burpy lid on top of this one here too, because it's going to be gassing off as well. And there you have it. Homemade sauerkraut in a little while. Now if you find that there's not quite enough liquid to stay above the level of the cabbage in the jar or whatever vessel you're using, you can make a little extra brine. Go with 1/2 teaspoon of salt in 1/2 cup of water. Make sure it's not chlorinated water. Make sure it's good water. Chlorine will kill all of your bugs that you're trying to create. And then you can just top up your jar with that to the level it needs to be above the sauerkraut. Now as this stuff ferments, you're going to see some bubbling and some foam appearing in the jar, and maybe some little air bubbles down inside the sauerkraut. That's completely normal. Don't worry about that. If your house is fairly warm, you can have it in 2 weeks. If your house is a little colder, it may take up to 3 or 4 weeks, depending on the temperature of where you're keeping it. But try to keep it in a dark place. And once it's fermented, it'll turn more of a translucent color. You won't see a lot of color in it. It'll be almost clear to almost a pale white color. And give it a taste. If you like it, it's ready. If not, let it ferment a little bit longer. But once it's done, you're going to remove that puck or the Ziploc bag full of water, whatever you're using, and put a regular lid on it and put it in the fridge. And use it up within about a month or two. It'll stay fresh. But if you see any kind of mold or anything going on in that jar, throw it out. Make sure your sauerkraut stays below the level of the brine in there, because if it doesn't, that's when you're going to get the mold. The brine is a preservative because it's got the lactic acid in it, so that's what keeps it fresh. So just make sure it stays below that. So I hope you give the recipe a try. I think you'll like it. And again, you can do lots of different vegetables. If you choose to buy that fermentation kit, there's a recipe book in there for all kinds of different vegetables and how to do pickles the old school way, making dill pickles that are fermented instead of pickled with vinegar. They're called sour dills. So we're going to try some of that too. I've never done those before. I've done the sauerkraut and really enjoyed it. So leave your questions and comments. Be glad to hear them. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to keep getting our videos, make sure you subscribe. And if you hit the little notification button, you'll get an alert every time we put one out. But if you're a regular viewer, you'll know when they come out. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and bye.